want to give a quick shout out to my patrons. Thank you so much for your support.
Hey y'all, it's Kate from the Literary Apothecary and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing the Sweet 16 round 4 in my Battle of the Books to find out which book was my favorite read out of 2022. Same rules apply in this round as in all the other rounds. 5 stars automatically move on, although I think at this point we have all 5 stars, so that doesn't really matter there. No DNFs are included, no rereads are included, nothing below 3 stars. Let me just get right in because I have a feeling this round and the future rounds are going to be really hard because I loved so many books that I've read last year. So our first matchup includes A Natural History of Dragons by Marie Brennan up against The Girl in the Tower by Katherine Arden. Wow, this one is a tough one. So who am I going to choose? I'm going to say this round goes to Natural History of Dragons by Marie Brennan because we have other books in this same series of The Girl in the Tower. This is the Winter Night trilogy by Katherine Arden, and I know we have at least one other book in this trilogy, if not the other 2 books still to come. So I'm going to hold out hope that one of those moves on and say I absolutely loved The Girl in the Tower. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. This was, I believe, book 2 in the Winter Night trilogy. It was just as magical as book 1. It had military, fantasy, strategy, and more plot development in this one. I really enjoyed it. Oh, this is so hard. Don't second guess yourself. Just keep going and move on to our next matchup. We have Jade Legacy by Fonda Lee up against Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby. Another 5-star, really difficult matchup. This one I have to give to Jade Legacy because that book was just phenomenal. But Razorblade Tears was so good, y'all. I read this as part of the Wine and Crime book club with Leslie at the Nerdy Narrative, and I loved everything about this. This was also a Books My Boyfriend Gave Me series book, and it was fantastic. The tensions were high and the emotions were even higher in this book. We had an intense look at a double murder of a gay biracial couple. It was absolutely fantastic, and I still think about it to this day. I still think about this book, but that's the end of the road for Razorblade Tears. Our next matchup is The Embroidered book by Kate Hartfield up against Middlegame by Shauna McGuire. This is another tough one, but this one I have to give to Middlegame because that book I still think about today. And so The Embroidered book, like I said, I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. I absolutely loved this book so much. This was a historical fantasy, but more on the historical side. There was fantasy in there. It played a big part, but I feel like the history with Marie Antoinette and her sister and everything going on in France and Italy at that time took more precedence. I really enjoyed this book so much. It felt like it was just so well written, and I can't wait to reread it one day and unpack even more because there was so much packed into this book that this will be a book that you can read multiple times and get different things out each time. But the end of the road for The Embroidered book. Our next matchup, we have The Last Man by Mary Shelley up against Augustus by John Williams. So y'all know how much I love Mary Shelley, but I have to give this one to Augustus by John Williams, and in a future round you'll find out why about that. But The Last Man by Mary Shelley, this was a post-apocalyptic almost romance story, love story. You had emotion and desperation like Mary Shelley writes in all of her books. It was amazing, breathtaking. It was so much more than just a post-apocalyptic story. It was more than I expected from this book, and it was just really, really fantastic. Alright, next up we have The Bear and the Nightingale by Katherine Arden up against The Space Between Worlds by Micaiah Johnson. This is truly hard. These choices are so hard. This one I'm going to give to The Space Between Worlds and say goodbye to The Bear and the Nightingale. I gave both of these books 5 out of 5 stars. The Bear and the Nightingale was just so magical. The audiobook was like listening to a fairy tale, but it does not beat out The Space Between Worlds, which completely changed my reading genres. But The Bear and the Nightingale was such a great start to the Winter Night trilogy that I highly recommend it to everyone out there. Our next matchup is Guns of the Dawn by Adrian Tchaikovsky up against Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke. Even though this is a tough choice like all of these have been, this I feel like is an appropriate matchup because I got similar vibes from both of these books. However, I'm going to say Guns of the Dawn by Adrian Tchaikovsky moves on because I love that book so much. Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke. Gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. It had amazing characters and incredible wit. The magic was spectacular. The history tying in felt like it was very well researched. You had little snippets of history. I would say this was much more heavily fantasy than history, but there was some history sprinkled in there. And we had a gradual build-up over this big, ginormous book. I absolutely loved it, but it does not beat Guns of the Dawn for me. Our next matchup, and this is the second to the last matchup in this round, The Winter of the Witch by Katherine Arden up against Waking Ursa Minor by Helen Reich Peterson. Oh, this is so hard because, like, I love the Winter Night trilogy and I don't want to see it end right now, but I absolutely loved Waking Ursa Minor. And I'm having Helen on my channel again next weekend on the 22nd. So this is a hard one. I'm going to give this one to Waking Ursa Minor because I talk about that book all the time still and I recommend it to people all the time. And Winter of the Witch was the third book in the Winter Night trilogy. Sadly, that's the end of the road for the Winter Night trilogy. I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars, just like the others. I love this book so much. There was so much world building and depth, and the magic was fantastical, but it just, when I think about it in my head compared to Waking Ursa Minor, it is like just a smidgen below that book because that book just blew me away. Our last matchup of this round includes House of Salt and Sorrows by Aaron A. Craig versus The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter by Theodora Goss. Again, both 5 stars. This one I'm going to give to House of Salt and Sorrows by Aaron A. Craig, and this is kind of a surprise for me because while I really loved that book, I would not have expected it to make it as far as it did, but that's the beauty of the bracket way of doing these best books. You don't know what it's going to go up against, and you don't know how far these books are going to go. So that's the end of the road for The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter. So this book I absolutely loved. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. It was The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter was such a fun ride. This is a story of the female creations from some of science fiction's most famous monsters. We've Frankenstein, we've got Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, we've got Moreau, we've got a whole bunch of others that I can't think of right now. But this was so fun, and I really want to read the rest of the series sometime. But it does not win this round. So that was my Sweet 16 round. Hopefully a lot shorter than the other rounds. Let me know in the comments below, as always, what you agreed with, what you didn't agree with, What choices would you have made differently? What choices surprised you here? As always, my Patreon and my Discord information will be in the description below. Keep reading, and I love you all to the moon and back. Bye.